Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Pretty good. Shane mentioned that he's gonna be late a little bit.
Okay, good to know. Hi.
Hey folks, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. Busy. Oh, a lot of people and not much on the agenda specifically.
No.
I think these meetings still are just going into just general discussions around a lot of topics in a kind of unstructured way, which is fine.
Yeah, that tends to happen. And I think for the primary meeting, it's also about like reviewing what we've talked about over the last couple of weeks and maybe getting more people up to speed or involved.
Exactly.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, people.
Oh,
How are you doing?
pretty good.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hi Jeff.
What's going on? There's snow on the ground here, and my head is spinning. Can't handle this.
It was snowing yesterday in Chicago. It was already melting, but it was snowing. Yes,
Ugh.
crazy. And I was actually grilling and back in February when it was like nice 60 plus degrees. So like
You weren't
50,
grilling in the snow? Derek
yeah.
in flip-flops and shorts out in the snow grilling.
I think we have 24 degrees next Saturday. I mean, European degrees, not
That's
Nice.
nice.
US degrees. So it's quite warm.
Yeah, I actually
So,
thought that was an April Fool's joke. Like I read it on Twitter on April 1st. Like they were predicting 25 degrees for Saturday, and it just seemed completely unimaginable.
I would
yeah, I mean,
take
it's
it. I
April.
would take it 25 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, there's not a lot skiing anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really short season this year, and at least in Europe, it was warm pretty long, and then not cold enough.
We complete, by the way.
Yeah, Shane
I think
mentioned
we're
he's
just
gonna be
waiting for
late, so that's
Shane.
he said he's gonna be late, so we're around there.
Yeah, so Carmen is not here this week, so he's not coming. But I see Uri, so I think we are good.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's Composite Schemas working group, the primary working group, of course. So by being here, we have all agreed to the specification membership agreement, the participation guidelines, the contribution guide, and the code of conduct, links to all of which are in the agenda as usual. First up is to do introduction of attendees. So we'll just go through, do that now in the order that we are in the agenda. Uri, if you can add yourself a pull request, that would be appreciated. Thank you. We'll start with me. Hello, everyone. I'm Benji.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael.
And we'll be here in a minute. So hi, I'm Jeff.
I'm Derek from Apollo.
I'm Martin, also from Apollo.
Hello, I'm Raphael from J Cream.
I'm Pascal from Chili Cream.
I'm Simon from Apollo.
There's only Yuri left. He's Yuri from the guild.
I'm Uli from the guild. Just submitted a PR. Sorry.
Excellent.
Oh.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, ideally, if we can have a volunteer or two for note taking, I'm happy to take notes. Jeff, fantastic. Thank you for helping. If anyone else wants to also muck in, especially when me or Jeff are talking, that would be excellent. Thank you. Since we don't have any particular agenda items, well, does anyone want to add any explicit agenda items? We will be doing a quick summary of the other calls, which often leads to discussion. But if there's anything specific people want to talk about, say it now. No, wonderful. Okay, I'm just going to quickly see if there's any action items that need doing. No, there are no open action items. Well done, everyone. Fantastic. In which case, I will hand over to Michael to do a quick summary of the previous calls.
Yes, and there's quite a couple of things we have kind of worked on, and also some that we agreed on. But again, we hopefully agree also in the larger round. So the first thing we talked about, and let me share my screen. It's a couple of things. Share. There. Oh, the first thing, just as a reminder, it's a bit, I know the weekly participants will know, was the batching issue that we discussed. This guy here, finding the right batching protocol. No, it's not this one. Batching mechanism. So, and then we discussed a couple of batching variants that we could take. We tried out the request batching and the variable batching. As a refresher, it's this guy here that is used by a couple of GraphQL servers. And then there is the variable batching, which is ideally for our use case. We agreed on that variable batching is a good thing, and that with that we can solve the issues that we have for batching between the gateway GraphQL server, router, or whatever people call this component in their tech stack, and the downstream GraphQL servers. So basically, if we have a list of items, we collect a couple of keys from there, and then we dispatch to the downstream services requests. So what we have not agreed on, and that is should the HTTP GraphQL working group pick up once I filed the final spec proposal from us to it, is decide on the response format. There is a couple of around, like Apollo uses multipart. The guild, for instance, has GraphQL SSE, which also we, for instance, use. And then Benji threw in another one, which is JSON-L, which is also very promising. So we didn't decide on the actual encoding of the result, more on the mechanism, I think, that is unblocking us. And the other working group can actually solve what kind of response encoding we should use.
Yeah. One thing to mention here maybe is that variable batching can also be combined with request batching. So
yes.
Variable batching is ideal for our use case, but it doesn't preclude people from using request batching. Yeah. So the GraphQL working group should probably look at both together.
Yes. Exactly. That's also how I wrote up the proposal. Just have to find the time to polish it and send it over to Benji. We also, the prototype that we at the moment have implements also both. It actually implements both of the variants with all of the response formats that I mentioned, just to because I wanted to get the sense of what it means to use whichever of these. But ideally, we come to an agreement at some point which format we use, but we decided for us, for our work, it's not important that we decide that now. That should the HP over GraphQL working group do, and we focus on the actual work that we have to do on the spec. So we decided the mechanism is the right one for us, but the details we can negotiate. Is that right, Martin?
I think so. Yeah. And I would say perhaps even sort of look at that in a larger context, because ideally we'd have sort of one common transport that would also support like incremental delivery for defer and stream, and it would also support subscriptions. So there's a number of use cases I think that we've all built solutions for that it would be good to look at together. And this is one new feature that we'd like to see supported by that.
Yes. Okay, so the other thing we started working on, let me go over there. There's is test cases. It's not real test cases yet. It's more like Kamil started the work, the initial work on that, and I went through them and tried to figure out how they are implemented in each solution. Like we have, for instance, the federation specification, and here we have a basic example with provides. And we basically have here examples of how this works out, the specific feature. It's about features. And then we have the translation, okay, in it actually looks like this. And then in Fusion, the same would be like this. So we get a sense of how these translate. We get a sense of how the migration path from each of these solutions might be. And also if the use cases that we have today with customers are actually solved kind of way. It's not yet enough. We need a couple more. I have done this now for all of them. Last week, this was not ready. And from this, we kind of get a good idea of how these directives that we defined really work out. And like for me personally, in the last week, I have come to find lookup my favorite for these kinds of things, by the way. Not that I want to influence anybody, but
no, I definitely like lookup as well. I think it was one of the contenders when we landed on Finder. And since we haven't yet implemented Finder, yeah, I think this is a really good option. But yeah, we need more people to.
Yeah, it would be a good thing if you guys also look through it. I put it in the RFC folder here in test cases, and like I have to actually read me together with Kamil a bit more explaining the test case. But most of the test cases, if you look at it, you will kind of get what is done here.
Yeah,
but
I guess it would be really nice. It would be really nice if we could define that as a kind of an action item, so that we go through these. And I mean, it's just that we have a point of review next main working group that we can talk about it, right? Because there are definitely test cases where the people from, I mean, this is mainly done by Michael and Kamil. These are test cases that came out of this, but I'm sure that you guys from Apollo, probably also people from Azura, etc., have a lot of test cases which are not covered with this, and it would be great if you could go through them and maybe add your special test cases as well.
Yeah. So what I also will do is kind of add the Fusion supergraph definition. So you also see how we compose that a bit. And then we it would be good if we missed some obvious use case or combination where you say, okay, this combination of features have is popular with our customers, so that we don't that there's no oversight in this, and we kind of have a good picture of what we want to land on. There's also things like where one or the other approach doesn't support something. I just put a marker file here, not supported at the moment. This particular feature we agreed we do down the line. Let's first get the basics in, and then we look at these. But it's also good just to have it documented, kind of, okay, it's not there. So with these things in, as I discussed in the last meeting, I'm working on. So this is done, and I'm working now on defining the more refined version of the directives. That means when we look at the spec, we have kind of just thrown them together from Fusion and from Apollo Federation. So what we find here in the schema reference spec, there's, for instance, entity resolver, like this is what we call now lookup at the moment, at least in these things. But I want to have now a more fine-grained thing, and also work on the spec text here for each of the directives to have a precise, nice balloons, a precise definition of what they do and what they are for, what is the intended use case, and things like that. That's the next thing I start on, and I will do them as separate pull requests, as I pointed out last week. So for each directive, we will have a pull request that reworks the directives, and then everybody can chime in and say, okay, I don't like this, or could we go this direction? Could we have this name, or whatever? Sounds good. Yeah. So that's progress so far we are working on. And I think once we have the directives, the next thing, we don't have to discuss it at this point that much, is composition. Once you have the directives in place and we all agree to that, composition is the next logical step. Any comments?
Should we just call the entity resolvers lookup from now on? Because I believe if we find something better, then we will anyway have another vote about it, right?
If everybody agrees, I will just name it lookup in the spec edits.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
Are there objections?
No, if we do, we can probably just close this issue. There wasn't any other suggestions there.
Okay, that's good. That's also a decision from today. Lookup it is. And also because
it's going to be anyway like this. If next week someone has like the massive realization that whatever name is better, then we will anyway discuss it again. But we probably know that entity resolver is like 2 words, and we prefer 1 word, and lookup people seem to like, so we can just go on and call it lookup from now on. Then it's probably easier for writing the stuff around it.
That's a good decision. Let's take lookup. So I will rework that as one of the first things. Second, so we are also like, there were also no objections toward the batching, just because. Okay, because I always asked for agreement, but maybe somebody didn't want to spoil the party. That's a chance to.
On the batching topic,
yeah,
throw a span. No, I'm not going to throw a spanner in the works. I believe that you proposed somewhere else, I may have read this in passing, that the variable batching would only be used in the situation where there is also request batching. Is that something that I've made up, or was that said at some point?
You made it up. It can so the idea when we looked at it, we came to realize that actually, like, you can put the variable batching in the request batching, but
Yes.
that's kind of you can do that because the only thing that changes in there is the variables field is now a list of objects instead of an object. But it is not necessary, and for our use case, we could even live with just variable batching. But for the overall protocol, like if we look at clients and stuff like that, it would be really neat to have both of them and allow them to be combined. That's what I prototyped. That was an exploration. If that is like these decisions, I think should be on the protocol level, on the GraphQL over HTTP spec level. Like for us, it's just we have the requirement that we need the variable batching to work out.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I think
so
I think what I expect once we start looking at that at the protocol level, there are a number of other things we might want to take up. Like for instance, with the current request batching, the whole response is like one single body. And we may actually want to use one of these like multi-part or other mechanisms to deliver the batch responses independently and even in any order as they get resolved. So that might lead to other requirements to like index them or so I think there's a number of other things we can do to improve the current usage of these features. And I really hope we can tackle all of that together.
Yeah, so that's just as a note in my draft, which I still have to submit. I have described it exactly as that. So we don't have this array body anymore, but we have a stream body. Like, and this should ideally be reused in subscription over HTTP and different stream over HTTP. If we can come together to say, okay, this is so to say the list response for GraphQL if we have multiple results, and this is a single result, then we make a very good step forward for the GraphQL over HTTP.
Yeah, we effectively have two concerns. One is it's streaming responses, as in the case of stream and also subscriptions, but also multiplexing of responses as well. And we want to deal with both of these problems and ideally have them both use a similar or the same format. Definitely support that. So my thought at the moment is if we were to make it so that batching always came through as an array, like literally the request comes through as an array, it would make it very easy to differentiate. If we do it so that the variables is an array, then either we need to use a different key or we need to think more carefully. And I think requiring that we do the request batching in order to do variable batching, even if the request batch only has one request in it with then 10 or 20 different variable batches, I think that would be okay. Nonetheless, don't want to derail this too much because that's something we can discuss at the GraphQL over HTTP working group. Just generally want to put that thought out there and see whether there's any major pushback.
It's not something we need to answer right now, but one question is if we have the same mechanism for batching as for differ or for other features, what happens when you use more than one such features at the same time? Like if you have a batch and inside of the batch, one of the requests has differ.
We need to make sure they work well together. I think that's one of the requirements.
And I exactly looked into these things. So I covered them in the document. So the way, and I talked with Benji a bit about that. So we shot some messages between us around that. So you have basically an index in these documents. Like first you have a request index as a parameter in the JSON body, and then you have the variable index in the response. to know from which request it spawned. And then you can also have like the standard different stream props in there, so you can stream within these, and we know at the end to which from which request they were spawned, and also from which variable index, and the client can put that together. That's like I have a very extensive prototype. I can also put it if you want to play with it. I probably can put it for tomorrow online. As a GraphQL server, just you get a feeling with it. It implements actually all these 3 response types also. So you can see it with the Apollo multipart protocol. You can see it with the JSON-L protocol, and you can also get the sense of it with the SSE protocol. Thank you. Yeah, I put that on my list. So yes, Pascal.
The request ID is really nice, because that means that you can multiplex on a different channel, then you send the request. That's especially for the server use case. This is fantastic, because that means that you can send requests and stream it from a different channel.
Yes, I don't know if Benji also had a gist on. I think it was more regarding the response, but there we also, if I remember correctly, used already these fields to identify the things. So it works out very well in all the scenarios. Shane?
Yeah, I think like we discussed, we can probably move the discussion of both the input format and the response protocol to, I think, the separate working group to make decisions. But in our spec here for the composite groups, we can point at that and say, if you support this, we can use this. But I think the key word is if a subgraph supports it. Right, not all subgraphs or in the immediate release of the spec are going to support that, and are still not going to support that. So I do think we need to call out, like, as far as runtime or whatever in our spec, that the fallback should be just send multiple requests, or use the alias or whatever it is, right? Like, there should be some fallback that works today with the current spec, and is at least called out in ours, so we can make sure we support that.
Yes, that's a good thing. I was thinking about how we put that in the spec. Maybe Benji also has an idea. So should we put it in the in the introduction of the spec? Basically, this spec relies on these spec features in the transport, or should we describe it more abstract, the batching, that it's not a requirement of the transport spec? If anybody has ideas.
Okay, this is a really interesting question. And the reason that I find this particularly interesting is because what we're talking about here, as is often the case in GraphQL, is the n+1 problem, right? But the GraphQL spec itself doesn't even mention data loader, for example, as a particular technique to solve this. It's known and discussed as a solution outside of the spec, but it's not actually detailed inside of the spec. So I think I would need to scan over the spec itself and find out exactly what it does say about the n+1 problem, because I'm sure it must mention it. And I think that we would then just follow the main specs lead on this for what to do for the composite schemas spec.
Yeah, it could be either we decide on it's a node where we refer to this. So ideally, downstream services implement that. If not, then this will happen. Or we have an appendix. Or we have an appendix, like I don't know, an appendix describing ideally the capabilities of a downstream GraphQL server, something like that. But yeah,
we did. Sorry, go ahead, Martin.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that I mean, we have sort of decided that we'll describe executment in fairly abstract terms. So the actual query plan format is not part of the spec. So I don't actually think batching would affect sort of the semantics of execution. Like, we can still, so we can definitely describe it there as a node. but it doesn't affect sort of how we describe possible execution paths, for instance, because whether we execute a number of fetches in one request or a separate request doesn't affect the semantics. It only has performance impact.
Yeah, I think
It's true.
we did talk about it last week. I believe that we said that, but there was some, I can't remember what it was, but there was some counter argument against just leaving it out.
The one thing we want to make sure is that whoever reads the spec,
Yeah,
to make their GraphQL server a valid subgraph, should find there, ideally implement this thing from the transport, have this capability, then you are a performant subgraph. And there is Derek,
Yeah,
sorry.
so I got a question overall, because well, we're talking about those new mechanisms, right? And it's all great, and I love the request batching, variable batching. Those are great things, but those are not standard GraphQL features, meaning that not all subgraphs are gonna support it for quite some time, right? So are we probably we should call it out that this is something that graph, like the users know which subgraphs actually support it, or do we want to also try to figure out a mechanism for the subgraphs to actually tell that they are supporting it? So like in GraphQL over HTTP spec, right, we say we have a response, maybe there's with the version there, that's application JSON plus GraphQL, whatever version there that tells you that kind of maybe that's it, but still you would have to make a query to get something back, which I don't think it's.
I mean, you can.
great.
It's an HTTP feature. You can just say that you accept with the qualifier. You can send a request, and you can say that you accept this protocol, and you get back one of the protocols that the server supports, right?
But
Yeah, but like when you're creating a batch, right? So you would create a batched JSON, right?
Yeah,
You
true.
send it to the server and it crashes, right? So you probably don't want to do that.
It's the response format wouldn't be the problem. It's the request format which is the problem. I agree. I see.
The issue here is something we discussed often in all the specs, in all the subcommittees, about capability checks. But I think for our spec, it should be out of scope. If there is a capability check, again, this would be in the GraphQL over HTTP spec, because this is transport feature, and we would need to describe it there. And then we could use it if something exists there.
So basically, I'm thinking about from like the query planner perspective, there has to be some input saying, hey, if I'm going to this graph, I can use the batching. I can use this batching, or I can use that batching, or I have to split it out. So there has to be some external input there that basically we have to be aware of it.
Yes.
And I think in the spec we can sort of describe this as like we expect there to be a mechanism to expose these capabilities to the query planner, but it'll probably be in a platform specific way for now, because we have no standard way of doing this.
Yeah, in the worst case of solutions, you could have like in the specific implementation, you could have it as a configuration that you set manually. For the spec, we don't care how we get there. If there is a standard in the GraphQL over HTTP spec to expose these things, and that was a discussion at some point, then we can certainly use it and say, okay, ideally inspect it like that.
Well, even then, the question is whether we want to do sort of dynamic checks at query planning time, because or at composition time. I don't think that's something that we would be very happy with. For instance,
no, it could be at composition time, right? When you drop the schema, but also like this.
But even then, you're expecting there to be running servers. You need to have access to them. This sounds more like configuration information that needs to be made available to composition and query planning.
I agree. It's out of scope. Yeah.
So just to clarify, that's how it's already implemented in the router, both for client and subgraph batching. It's just you explicitly say, I know that subgraph supports batching, so please use it. It's an opt-in explicitly. So that's what we've already done.
Yeah. That's also how we do it in Fusion. It's a configuration that you say per subgraph.
Yeah, also for query planning, it would just care about the execution of the actual step, right? I mean, it's still the same execution step in the query planner. It's like fetch this data. It's like a technical detail if it uses the batching or not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's different semantic, but in the end, if it should support, if it's just a performance optimization, the planning should not be affected of it anyway. It should just be like,
Yeah, you have
execute.
like, I think Apollo does the same. Like in Fusion, we have in the query planner, we have this step where we compose results, but basically, I think you call it flatten, where you unwrap the results and make them fit into the overall shape.
Yeah.
But there you care about the detail. Is it a list of things, or is it just a single thing?
Yeah, but even this would be the same. It's just the execution of the fetch would just be either a parallel request or it's a batch request. It's just the execution semantic which is different from
There
a
is
planning perspective.
There is a slight subtlety though, I think. So for example, if the backend service supports batching, then the batch fetch would effectively be cheaper. So your query planner is more likely to choose that. If it doesn't support it, then it might use one of the secondary access methods instead, just because it's more expensive because you can't do a batch. So you'd have to do, n+1 queries.
That's very true, yes.
That's also what we do. You kind of steer it to the batching mechanism. But I mean,
Yes.
most of the things, so for us, like most of the things is details. We describe that there is a batching mechanism for us to have one request with multiple sets of variables, and that's basically how we batch. The rest is transport details. Also, how we configure the gateway is an implementation detail. We just know that there is that we have some kind of capabilities per downstream service, and then we are good, I think, from a spec. And when Benji has a better idea of how we put that in a note or in an appendix, then we can just move it there, and people can then inspect it. But it's not a blocker. That's an important thing. Okay. So, but everybody is okay that we go and focus now on the directives for the next. It will be probably 2 or 3 weeks to get all the details in the directives and to get a good spec text out of there, especially with the input that everybody will have to these.
Yeah, I think we should definitely leave room for everyone to comment, but if I'm being honest, I don't think we probably in 3 weeks we would have agreement from everyone. I feel like this one's probably going to take a little bit longer. So if we're trying to set expectations here,
Even among Apollo engineers, there will be a lot of folks who want to weigh in and figure out, what it means for us. So
I just like with my 2-3 weeks comment, I just wanted to lower, like it's not next week. So we write the text up, and then until we refine, like there will be a lot of input in this process. Okay.
I think what you proposed about doing it on a pull request per directive basis as well is a really good way of setting that up. It allows a lot of discussion for the more controversial ones and an easier, quicker merges for the less controversial ones.
Yeah, that also was the idea, to basically not block each of them, because we are haggling on details of one of them.
Lovely. Well, that was a good summary of all the previous meetings, and also an interesting discussion on a few topics there. Is there anything else that anyone would like to discuss? Well, if there's nothing in particular, I would like to go on, Jeff.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you're about to say the same thing, but yeah, there's a blog post draft for graphql.org here. I think it is kind of like penciled in for sometime this month. Folks want to weigh in on it. Benji gave it a once over. I think he made a better starting point, I think, for it. Please do, weigh in. There's a couple of spots where like it's a fill in the details on certain aspects of like the ecosystem here, because some technologies are noted by name and things like that. And so want to make sure that the group feels good about it. And we should probably get the byline figured out too on like, authorship. And should probably show a broad spectrum of authors from across the community. So make sure we all feel good about it. It's out there for anybody to kind of take a look at. If you edit it, just make sure to just put a quick note in there in the GitHub discussion or in the comments or whatever, just so folks know that you took a look and wanted to add some editorial there. So that's just my PSA to the group.
That's awesome.
Yeah, excellent. Completely agree. Also, in general, if anyone wants to write any blog content for the GraphQL blog, please reach out. I'm sure we can get that arranged. But yeah, please do definitely weigh in on that. And we found that having more people in the byline is generally better. It like shows how broad the GraphQL Foundation can be. So I think that's good. That isn't what I was going to say, but it is a very good point. So thank you for calling it out, Jeff. No, I was going to say bring it back to GraphQL over HTTP stuff. So if we haven't got anything specific to talk about, I think there's broadly two things that we're talking about here that affect the GraphQL over HTTP spec. One is the request format for batching, and one is the response format for batching, incremental delivery, subscriptions, and various other things. Is this so? Go on.
And there is I think on the input format request definitions, there is a broader alignment, I would say. I would even say that we are all pretty aligned. But on the response format, there needs to be discussions, and also look at the ecosystem, how broad things are used, and where we want to go with this thing.
Okay, cool. So I'm not sure whether the right place for that discussion is here or at the GraphQL over HTTP working group. The GraphQL over HTTP working group isn't currently meeting, not because it's inactive, just because it hasn't really got anything to do. Everything's sort of okay. But adding this in would be good. We also do need to, at some point, publish officially the first release of the GraphQL over HTTP working group. I think we're waiting on some details of some security stuff to put in there, but it's just like finishing touches, really. So I'm happy for you folks, and I know, Michael, you were saying that you've implemented like an initial version of all this, so I'm happy for you folk to play around with those things, see what conclusions you come to. We don't have to use the same thing to handle all these different protocols, but I think it would make sense if they can all be handled in the same way to do that, because if it's easier to support all the different features, that's going to be better for everyone, and less stuff to specify is generally better.
And I think they compose well, like they can all be used together.
Yes,
it would be an exception if a protocol didn't support that. We'd have to specify the exception.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There's also like additional concerns that we need to factor in. So, for example, certain content types will involve different security parameters when it comes to usage in the browser, for example. So we need to analyze each of those as well. So I'm happy to either schedule a GraphQL over HTTP working group where we can discuss this, which would be just on the regular GraphQL over HTTP working group schedule, or if you'd rather discuss it at these working groups, come to a vague conclusion, and then present that at a later stage, happy with that too. Just let me know, whoever's doing the work, let me know what you want.
Yeah, so the way I was thinking on it is like we are in agreement about the broader thing here, but I think the rest of the work, I have a quite long draft that describes a lot of things around. I just have to find the time to polish it up, and I will submit it to the RFCs folder of the GraphQL HTTP spec as a pull request, and then I think the work on the response format should happen there, because like we have so much to do on the core spec that for me it's enough to have a broad agreement on the mechanism and the details. So funny with the balloons always, but the details we should do there, because also there's I know from Apollo Glasser, I don't is involved there. He's working on the Apollo server. So there are also other people involved in the HTTP spec that should have a look at this and might have different input from ours. So it should definitely be there.
I'll add of the things that we have discussed internally on our issues, there's only one that's actually missing as an RFC to the GraphQL over HTTP group. So there's already an RFC for incremental delivery or multi-part. There's already an RFC for servers and events. So what we're probably looking at adding then over there as an RFC is just the JSON lines one that we suggested. And I think at that point, we can just basically hand it off to that separate group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like we want a broad coalition of servers and clients to support this format, and that group is necessarily the same as the group that's working on this spec.
Yeah, and if you want to discuss this anymore at this working group as well, I suggest that you invite Dennis, who's the maintainer of the GraphQL HTTP library, and also like the person behind GraphQL SSE, GraphQL WS, a few other libraries, because he's very knowledgeable in these things, and his input will be very valuable to you, I'm sure.
Yes, and by the we did. So I put them, but I put him also in the Slack group to have him on the discussions about SSE, also to get the different viewpoints, like from Martin, and also from like not from Martin as a person, but more from the Apollo side of things, but also to get from Dennis the side on GraphQL SSE. So in general, we have a good exchange on these things, but I think we need to make it more formal and go to the spec group, and then also write down the downsides or the upsides of picking one or the other.
Okay, awesome. We've got about 10 minutes left if anyone wanted to discuss anything. I didn't see any previous interest, but maybe you've thought of something in the interim. Nope. In which case, let's end this meeting 10 minutes early and have 10 minutes to ourselves. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
See you in
See
Thank
you
you.
next month, or maybe in half an hour. Indeed.
Yeah.
Bye.